How can writing video games help you write fiction? This episode, a conversation with science fiction writer, editor, and video game writer Janine Southard.
Your dialogue has to be as condensed as it possibly can while still showing interesting things are going on and keeping the person who's reading it enticed. Because if you make it too long, no one's going to read that. They just sort of start to scroll and it becomes TLDR, right? Too long, didn't read. But if you keep it short and concise, you can get a lot of information across.
I'm Chris Well, and you're listening to DIY Author. You're an author. Maybe you're taking the traditional route. Maybe you've chosen an independent path. Or maybe you want the best of both worlds. Wherever you want to go as a writer, DIY Author is here to help you on your journey with advice, encouragement, and practical tips. Because do it yourself doesn't have to mean do it alone. Welcome to another episode of DIY Author. I'm your host, Chris Well. Our guest this time is a science fiction writer who has funded more than one of her books on Kickstarter. She's a freelance editor, and she writes story and dialogue for video games. We'll get to that interview in a moment. But first, do you have your blueprint? If you're promoting a book, then DIY Author has created a free download just for you. It's our Promo Rocket Media Campaign Blueprint. This blueprint comes with a series of free lessons to help you focus on the right things in your book promotion and to help you pace yourself so that you don't become overwhelmed. Download your free media blueprint at DIYauthor.com/blueprint. And now for that interview. My guest is author Janine Southard. She writes science fiction. She's funded her books on Kickstarter. She's a freelance editor, and she writes story and dialogue for video games. In this conversation, we discuss what a writer can add to a video game, how writing games has helped her write fiction, and if you're thinking about putting your book on Kickstarter, why you may want to learn how to bake cookies. And now my interview with Janine Southard. Janine, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Janine is, let's see if I can frame this correctly. There are a lot of pieces to what we're going to be talking about because Janine writes a lot of different kinds of things, but they're kind of related, and I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation. She writes fiction, she edits fiction for other people, and she writes games, and she writes corporate marketing. She writes for corporate clients. So am I explaining that correctly, Janine?
Yes, you are.
Let's start at the beginning before you got into all of these various things. What are your earliest memories of stories?
I really can't remember a time that stories were not a part of my life. So it's kind of funny when you think of writers and when they're children, they probably didn't write as much. Not only did I have pages upon pages where I had written my own choose your own adventure novels by hand, but I was a kid in the 80s where we did not always have computers, but my dad had this work laptop, which I swear weighed as much as I did. And I would write the starts of novels on that all the time. I don't think I bothered to save any of them, which is good because as a child I had that quintessential writer's problem where you never finish anything. But I wrote first chapters of so many brilliant pieces when I was like 6, 7, 8 years old and kind of didn't stop.
That's really interesting that it's all the beginnings of stories.
Oh, does
and it was a really
do
question.
I'm sorry, but doesn't everybody?
I don't think I've ever heard anybody do that as a strategy. There's just something very interesting about the way you. I mean, a lot of people they abandon things in kind of a casual way, but the way you kind of described it, it's like that was the strategy. Was I'm going to write the beginnings of all of these novels.
Well, I was a kid, but that was the fun part for me then. Now the fun part for me is all of the outlining and figuring out how things go together. But then the fun part was, who are my characters? What are they going to do? What are they like? And I didn't care at all about inciting incidents or plots. I just wanted to make them exist. It was very fun.
Now, where in that history did you start to edit as a separate thing?
Editing. My first real brush with professional editing was when I was in college. I did an internship with Tor Books. They're a science fiction and fantasy publisher in New York. It was totally unpaid, and basically me and the other interns, we all read whatever manuscript people had sent in and decided if we liked them or not, and if we were going to pass them on to someone. If we'd gotten a full manuscript because an editor had requested it, we wrote up these long, like 4-page long letters about what we liked, what we didn't like, what worked, what didn't work, that kind of thing. And that was my first real experience of what editing was like. And it was great and wonderful, and I loved reading everyone's things. Tor is kind of special in that, at least at the time, I don't keep up now, they took unagented submissions. So we got all sorts of things. It was very broad in terms of what we would get to read as interns and what we would get to see and mistakes we would get to see people make and things that we could say, oh, that's how to fix this, because we saw so much of it. But then I foolishly decided that I didn't want to live in New York, and I thought, well, there's the end of my editing career, much as I loved it. And I would just edit for friends. Writers always know other writers, right? So I was editing for this anthology, and I was editing for all these short stories for a friend out of Australia, and so on and so forth. Oh, and then for a while I was doing freelance manuscript reading for Tor. And then with the whole internet fiction, people doing their own thing, and all the small publishing houses boom that's come up in the last couple of years, it didn't matter that I didn't want to live in New York. I still know how to put a story together and sort of vaguely know what's going on with the industry. And so it's great. I get to do it now.
The part where you were at Tor, I can see that as a clear part of the chain of why you do science fiction and fantasy now. Had you already chosen that path prior to being at Tor, or was that part of how you ended up choosing?
Oh, I had definitely chosen that way, way back. Science fiction has always been the thing that I love reading as well as writing. It's so hopeful, right? Like, no matter what horrible dystopian things might be happening in your terrible world, we're still there. Our culture has continued on. We've made this new technology. Sure, it's turned back on us. Skynet has been terrible, but we made Skynet, right? I love the hope to that. And all of the excitement that comes from figuring out, where are we going to go next? What's the next leap of progress? So I already read that all the time. It was a large part of what I was writing. And, in the bookstores, fantasy goes hand in hand with science fiction. So I did some of that. And yeah, that made the most sense to me. And, like most people in the world, I guess I also read romance novels. So that made it really easy to sort of segue over. You'll probably ask me where else I have edited for, included for some romance places.
Okay, so that does answer my next question. So as an editor, you don't just edit science fiction, you edit other kinds of things.
Once you get past science fiction, fantasy, and romance/romantic erotica, I know that I would not hire me for money for those other things. There are people out there who are better than I am. Like, when it comes to mystery novels, sure, I can go through, I can look at your writing, I can give you my opinions, but I don't read mystery novels. I have no idea. I cannot tell you what a cozy mystery is and how to make it different from a detective mystery. I don't know what people are reading in that. So I wouldn't trust me with a mystery. But if you have something with spaceships in it or with interesting elvish magical systems, that's my thing, man. Bring it to me. Bring it to me.
So what do you do as an editor?
There's sort of 3 different levels of editing. The first one is what what we all call developmental, which is about structure and storytelling and pacing. Do you need these 2 characters? Can you combine them into one person? If there's something missing from your plot, kind of thing. So what I usually do for that is I'll read someone's manuscript twice through before taking any notes, just to sort of figure out who all the characters are and what it reads like as an experience. And then I'll write up a long letter of what's working for me and what isn't from that really big overall point of view. And sometimes I won't be able to help myself, and I'll also make a lot of notes in whatever the Word document is. Second level of editing is line editing, which is about the structure of your sentences and about pacing and do you really want everything to be the blank of blank, right? Or seeing things that you do very often, and is that part of your voice, or is that just repetition that you don't need? And it's sort of making things flow more smoothly. The third kind of editing is sort of the copy editing, proofreading, putting your commas in all the right places, etc. Honestly, I farm out my own copy editing, so I'm good at it, but I don't really tell people that I will do their copy editing for them on a professional level. I'll do it for friends if they want it, but that's all three of them. Mostly, though, I really love the developmental part where I get to say, oh, here's where your story needs some more oomph, or maybe your story really starts here.
Now, you had mentioned editing for houses. Can independent authors approach you directly about hiring you as an editor?
Yeah, they definitely can. And that's mostly what I've been doing for the last couple of years, has been independently for people that I've met or that know that I have this editing background. I haven't really done a lot of publicizing, I guess, that I'm available for it, but I am. And yeah, I like working with individual authors a lot, actually, especially, it's going to sound weird, but I actually prefer working with indie authors who are going to be putting books out themselves because it's really easy to see what's important to them. They only have two customers, right? The customer is either the person who's going to buy their book or themselves and what's really important to them. Whereas when you work for a big house, which I also love, but there are a lot of internal clients where different people expect different things from each book, and they might not have told you that in advance. So it's great to work for an author who knows what they want.
What would you consider the essential thing for an author to remember about editing?
If you're going to do your own editing, the first and most essential thing is to put away your manuscript before you start editing it. Like, you just finished it, you're super excited, good, great, go out, run in the park. Wait a couple of weeks. I think Stephen King suggests 6 weeks, and Stephen King is smarter than I am, so 6 weeks, way to go. And then you'll have enough space from that draft that you can go back and say, oh, what was I thinking with, chapter 5? And it's a lot easier. I've actually really noticed this recently. I picked up an old project of mine, seriously old. It started it in 2002. I just finished it recently, and I'm going back to those first chapters, which I have not looked at in 12 years. And it's so easy to see these huge things that I would not have noticed then, but now I can say, oh, I need so much more description here, or, oh, this character is totally pointless, which is really great and helpful. Other things that I would suggest to authors who are editing either their own work or having somebody help them, a couple of opinions from your writing group, because different people see different things and think different things are important. And remember that editing is a process. Your book is not perfect in its first draft form, and that can be freeing, that you don't have to write the perfect first draft. Your first draft can be terrible, but by the end, it will be beautiful and wonderful, and everybody will love it.
Now, how has your work as an editor affected your own fiction as a writer?
It's definitely helped me to see things that are pretty common. I wrote a post about first pages, right? And all of the things that should go on a first page and what shouldn't go on a first page, and use of cliches and so on. You already know all of the stuff about writing that shows up like this, but it really brings it home for you when you see a number of manuscripts coming through over your desk and you're like, oh, that really does happen a lot. And for one, you can forgive it. But when you read, 20 first pages in a row that are all cliched dialogue or all have the same one style of character, you say, maybe that's not what I need. It's also great practice editing other people's work for the things that I know I am really not as good at in my own. Description is the worst thing that I do in my own manuscripts, and I always have to go back and add it in later. It's not something that comes to me naturally. So when I'm going through and doing other people's manuscripts, I see, oh, here's a great place for a description, or, oh, right, that workshop that I took recently, I learned about doing this kind of description in this kind of location, and that'll go great in this person's manuscript. And then I've seen it in practice, both in terms of how it could be written in organically and how it could be edited in. And then I can go back to my own work and do the same thing, and sort of vice versa. It's all about practice, I guess.
You funded your fiction on Kickstarter. Had you published books prior to Kickstarter, or was Kickstarter you publishing your first fiction?
It's my first fiction not using a pen name. I think all of my non-pen name books now, all three of them, I have done using Kickstarter, and it has been a really different sort of experience, and I really like it. I like how it opens up that whole, how much money do you need to publish something? Do you need a publishing house to do all of the little bits for you? It's very DIY.
What was the best thing you did to make the Kickstarter project work?
Okay, this is going to sound totally ridiculous, but especially for your first Kickstarter projects as a single author that pretty much no one has heard of, the majority of the people who back your project are going to be people that you know in real life. And if not that you know in real life, that then people that you're 1 degree of separation away from. So the thing that brought me the most money, well, I guess there's sort of 2 ends of this, what action and what giveaway reward. But the action, bizarrely, that brought in the most money was baking cookies and bringing them around to people that I know and giving a giant plate of them to my significant other to take to work and telling people, hey, I have a project. You can look at it on Kickstarter. Here, have a cookie. Not, back my project or else you can't have a cookie, but letting people know that you're out there and then giving them something that they want. Because, yeah, those first projects are going to be, no one's going to find you on that first one. When it comes to what reward I had that was the most useful and really the most interesting, the biggest grossing reward has always been giving away naming rights to a character in whatever book that I am writing. I will warn anybody who is going to do that, however, that the pitfalls of that, if you haven't planned in advance, are you should let people know what gender this character is going to be and how wildly out there the names could be. I've had, characters that have to be male or female for story plot reasons, and somebody wants to give it a different name or an opposite gender name, and I had to sort of figure out, where can I actually put this? Can I change names around? So I'm much more careful about that now. The thing that's most popular as a reward is getting into the acknowledgments. Actually, I really feel like anything that's between like the $15 and $25 mark is going to be the most popular reward regardless. So make sure you have cool stuff in that spot.
The thing about the cookie, first of all, that's brilliant. But second of all, that actually is, in my experience working in the media, as an editor at various, publications, radio, whatever, the publicists who generally left the best impression were those that were able to show up with, if it was like a band or something, so that you met them in person, but also if they sent something with the press kit, it wasn't a bribe, but it makes you remember it.
Oh, good.
And so the thing about the cookie, what's great is whether you're changing their willingness to fund you on Kickstarter, the fact is they're not going to forget that. They are way more likely to remember to go look. So that's great. I think that's really great.
Thanks.
For the Kickstarter project, you said you've done 3 Kickstarters?
Yes.
I guess if you've done 3, you are fine-tuning this process as you go.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that you've tried that you thought this would work and it didn't, so now you've dropped it as you go?
Really big, awesome-sounding rewards that nobody ever picks up. It's great to have one of those, but if, the bottom of your page is littered with a cajillion rewards that nobody wants, I don't know. It just looks really barren to me, so I've cut those, and it hasn't made any difference. I think I had one that was, on my first project that said something like, if you give me $5,000 towards doing this novel, I will fly out to wherever you live and hand deliver you a first-run copy and, take you to dinner or something. And nobody took me up on that. And it might have been fun if that was the only one. But I think I also had, for $500, I'll send you as many ebooks as you want for your book club and Skype in. And I don't know. There comes a point where you have so many of them that really the level that I'm at, nobody wants. That I think they sort of become overwhelming. So that's my fun one. But I think the most practical advice that I can give about things that don't work for Kickstarter is don't ask for too much money. You see a lot of people asking for $10,000, $15,000, $1 million. I don't know about you, but me personally, I am not going to be the next Veronica Mars movie. You can look at one of my projects versus Veronica Mars, and it's it's whole different ballparks. And my first project, if I hadn't had a friend who owed me $500 and decided to give it back to me via my Kickstarter project, I might not have made it. So I've kind of come to this conclusion now that when Kickstarter is different from some of the other crowdfunding engines by if you don't fund your project completely, you don't get any of the money versus, for instance, Indiegogo, where if you don't fund your project completely, you still get whatever has been donated to you or venture capitalized to you or what have you. So with Kickstarter, I've really gotten to this point where I ask for pretty much exactly how much I need. Not how much I need to make the book and do all of the marketing and go out and drink coffee in the coffee shops while I do my editing or whatever, but how much I can't fund myself. So I think for my last book, I asked for, it wasn't a lot. It was like $1,500 maybe, which would cover the editing and my cover, and that was kind of it. Like I had to buy my own ISBNs, which I bought them in bulk, and 1,000 ISBNs is $1,000. So I have a lot of ISBNs now. They're only $1 a piece. So yeah, definitely sort of coming up with that schedule in advance of how much is it really going to cost me, and then how much can I sink of my own personal funding into this before I won't do it anymore, and only asking for that much. People can still keep donating after that. They can still keep giving you money and asking for rewards and supporting your project. Nothing stops them. But if you don't get to that minimum level, it will stop you.
Now, when that crazy potato salad thing happened on Kickstarter, where the guy got like $50,000 for just not even for potato salad, but to make potato salad. Now, you as a Kickstarter using person, do you see that and think, oh, why didn't I offer potato salad? How do you look at something like that?
I really look at that and I laugh because it's cute and it's funny. But I also see it as, one of these lucky outliers. People are making wacky projects on Kickstarter every day. And some of them are wacky in good ways. Some of them are wacky in bad ways. Some of them are the guy making potato salad in his kitchen saying, I'll take a photo of it for you, right? And it's kind of this luck of the draw. Who sees it, who thinks it's funny. It's like a viral video. There's only so many things you can do to make your video go viral. And after that, it's if you happen to have gotten it right. And so I try to just, laugh at it. I did not back the potato salad, I will admit. I didn't really need a photo of someone else's potato salad.
As you think about kind of the psychology of why people donate on something like this, I wonder if his thing had been crazy idea and, oh, by the way, I have a book and your money will go toward a book. I wonder if that would have taken just enough of the edge off the joke that it would have failed versus I'm going to, and maybe even secretly he has a book, but he's not going to tell people because he knows that if I just mention the potato salad, the novelty factor makes it work.
Yeah, maybe. I get the feeling that it's sort of like when you're looking for someone to date, right? The moment that you don't care about dating someone anymore and you've given up on dating, you see lots of people, but while you're desperate, you can't get anywhere. I sort of feel like it's got that edge to it. Like, he's all, I'm going to make a potato salad. Let me start a Kickstarter project for it. And so it works out.
One of the facets of your writing career is that you write games.
Yes.
So to start in, now, first of all, when you say games, what do you mean by games?
So my experience is with MMOs, massively multiplayer online role-playing games, and writing the dialogue. So famously, this is you come across like 5 people in the same town, and they all send you on basically the same quest of go out and get me 10 rabbits, go out and get me 11 rabbits, right? But you want to make that interesting for the people who actually read the dialogue. So, the first one wants rabbits to save his daughter's life, and the second one wants rabbits because they taste good, or, whatever. The third one wants the rabbits because they've been killing travelers. Who knows? But that sort of thing. And then also getting to do a lot of the in-book storybooks. A lot of times there'll be, you pick something up and it's the special mystical dagger of gobbledygook, and there'll be a book about it somewhere in the game that's, between 1 and 10 screens long about, where this awesome dagger came from and who created it. And sometimes in that book there will also be really useful information for the player later. I've also done a little bit of sort of that peripheral stuff and internal about here, how does this work and what's coming out in the new release. So the in-game stuff mostly.
So to gamers then, it would seem like being a, quote, professional game writer is almost like working at a candy factory. Is it as cool as it sounds?
It is actually pretty cool. You get to see all of the stuff that's coming out before it comes out. You get to you get to help decide which way the game is going and what's going to happen with all of the sort of plots and characters and so on. But there's also an aspect that I think a lot of gamers don't realize, which is it is grinding non-stop. So if you think you get bored now with the go out and kill me 11 rabbits, go out and kill me 5 more rabbits, oh, this quest is repeatable 100 times. Imagine if you have to do that once to see what the quest looks like, and then once more to, like, get all of your stuff into it. And then, oh, but what happens on the 100th time? I know that the developers have programmed in something really cool, and I have to know so that I can write the cool dialogue that, you know, the giant big boss of the day is going to spout at me when it kills me and then when it doesn't kill me. So I've got to play it at least twice to the 100th iteration before I can get killed or not killed. So there is a lot of just playing it and playing it and playing it. It's kind of funny. So the game that I've worked on the most is Ion Online, and I cannot play that at home anymore. It just frustrates me because I know what's going to happen, and oh my goodness, I've played this quest so many times, and I really miss having all of my godlike powers that I have when I'm on the internal servers and I'm working there that say, oh, you can just teleport to wherever, which of course is an actual player you can't do. There's a lot more to it than just, oh, let's go and play. Plus, you know, you can get, I saw a lot of the people that I worked with who had started out being really super more about the game than about playing the game, than about direct scoring and directing the game. They would get really into playing it the first couple times through, and they'd be like, oh, the play is really fun. And then it would almost be like the writing was less fun for them. So sort of being in that mind space where you want to write everyone is definitely the most fun part. So if you agree with me that, like, there's a new zone and you are going to write the one line of dialogue for every NPC in the zone and that is going to be fun, then you will love it. Like, seriously, I have 2 people on the sides of a different village that are arguing with each other, and I don't think pretty much anybody who plays the game, there's probably like 2% of people that have even noticed that they might know each other and have talked to both of them and remembered this. But yeah, there's a lot more to it than just, yay, it's playtime. There's actual work to be done.
Wait, I'm confused about the thing with the 2 villagers. Oh. You're saying that the people playing the game don't notice the 2 villagers?
Honestly, I don't know how much people pay attention. So first off, you'd have to talk to every single person in this village, and not just to every person who gives you a quest in the village, but to people who are just, you know, there to be scenery, and they might give you quests in later expansions, I guess, but I gave them all personalities to begin with anyway, and then, you know, made a giant spreadsheet of what their personalities are so that we can refer back to it later in the next iteration of the game if it's important. But, so right, there's a couple of 100 people in this village. Of those couple 100 people, you know, there's a few 100 as well that just have the one line and nothing else. So, you know, if you come into the village and you talk to the guy at the front desk or at the guard tower, I guess, and he says something to you, and then, you know, 5 playing days later, you make it to the other side of the village and you bother to talk to, you know, the girl who's kicking her heels sitting on the city wall, you'll find out that they're having an argument with each other. But if you don't bother to talk to them both, because what's the point? They're not going to give you a quest. And if you don't remember what the first person said to you, you might not notice this. But if you go through this village a number of times, you'll realize that everybody in it has their own life, and that life that they have is interconnected with everybody else inside of the village. And that thrills me to pieces, and I loved doing it.
So you've created almost like a secret narrative that the game designers didn't know about or intend or may even never find out about.
Exactly, but the writer made it up, so it's true.
Of course. When you look at writing fiction and then writing these, creating these character profiles and things for the games, how much does writing a game? I mean, is there any sense that writing one helps you write the other?
Oh, definitely yes. The 2 things that I have learned from writing games that have truly helped my fiction were 1, how to be a hack, and 2, dialogue. Let's talk about dialogue first because it's much better sounding. So basically, for these games, the majority of what I am writing is dialogue. I am writing dialogue, somewhere around 2,000 words a day, which doesn't sound like a lot to a writer, but it is when you realize that it has to follow a certain story arc and has to be super short. Your dialogue has to be as condensed as it possibly can while still showing interesting things are going on and keeping the person who's reading it enticed. Because if you make it too long, no one's going to read that. They just sort of start to scroll and it becomes TLDR, right? Too long, didn't read. But if you keep it short and concise, you can get a lot of information across. So you're spending all day writing the tightest, most character-driven, storyline-forwarding dialogue you possibly can. You only get to write the character's words. You don't get to write, he said daintily, and then he twirls his hair, right? You don't get any of that. You just get what comes out of their mouths. And you don't get to say, here's how it should sound, either. I remember for a while I was trying to write this one character as though they were the car talk guys. And the words worked really well, but in my head they have these brilliant Boston accents, and that definitely does not come across in the game, which is good because, it's a medieval fantasy bit, and Boston accents would be weird. So yeah, my dialogue now it's super tight and super easy, and when I get stalled writing a scene these days, what I will do is I will just write the dialogue for the scene, right? I will write, whatever the argument is that people are having or whatever, and I will write the dialogue for the scene, and then I can fill in all the bits around it because I know what's going to happen. And it just goes so much more smoothly, and I've been told that my dialogue is really snappy, which is great. It's good to have a thing that you're good at, and it's so much practice over and over, just dialogue, 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 dialogue. So that was the second thing. The first thing was how to be a hack, which is brilliant. So, you know how we're writers, you write when you can, you write when you're in the mood, whatever. Even if you're the kind of person who does the butt in chair every day and writes something, you write and you get to a certain point. That does not happen when you're in that sort of gaming corporate atmosphere, because they have already pushed out a release date and told all of the fans, this is when this game is coming out. This is when this expansion pack is coming out. So you only have that much time, and you must finish by then. So when I said I was writing 2,000 words a day of dialogue, that was my minimum, because I had to get through at least 10,000 words a week in order to hit our date to be done. And it did not matter the same way that it does to me with a finished novel. It did not matter if those words were great. They only really have to be good enough and done. If you have time later, go back and make them great. Go back and make this the most excellent quest that could possibly be, right? Go back and make this chain of events really awesome. But if you don't have time, you sort of have to say, I have made this interesting enough to move on, because if I don't move on, the game will not come out on time, and that is not acceptable. So yeah, about shipping the title is just a huge thing, and you get into this mindset after that of, okay, I have to get this done. Here's my deadline. And now when I sit down to write a novel, I can get into that mode of, even if I'm sort of feeling, well, it takes however long it takes, I'm still in this mindset of, I'm just going to get through this and I'm going to keep going. And sure, I'm going to stop and, check my RSS feeds and see what's exciting for 20 minutes, but it is straight back to work after that. It's a very different, sort of less lackadaisical style of work.
I'm also wondering, because you have multiple jobs that are writing related, where you are creating content, when it comes to writing your own fiction, how much do you find that you've used it up because you were working on a game and now you can't work on your novel because there's nothing left inside?
If you're talking about ideas, that doesn't happen. I actually really worried about that when I first started, of, if I make an entire village of 400 really interesting characters, right? How am I ever going to make a character of my own again? How will I ever have a cool idea? And the answer is that yes, you always have another cool idea. You could even write the exact same characters as you put into the game, but you have to put them in a different context because, otherwise you'd be writing fan fiction, and that's great, but you can't get paid for it. So you have to put them in a different context, and then once you give them new wants and new desires and a new thing around them, you've changed so much already that, oh, well, it's not really that character anymore, and hey, I can just keep going forward. So I don't find that, like, you tap out to creative well. In fact, you get more fluent at making things happen faster. If you're talking about, however, getting exhausted, just in general, yes, that does happen. So during the months that I'll be working on a video game, I will almost definitely not be writing my own fiction on the side, mostly because I get home and I do not want to look at a computer anymore. I will get home and I will read a book, or I will watch TV, or I will rollerblade around the lake and just be like, no, I don't want to write anything. I've been doing this all day. But the moment it ends, I've had all these background processes going on in the back of my head of, I know what my next project is, and I've kind of been thinking about it, on the bus, or while I'm driving, or while I'm grinding to get these 11 rabbits for the 100th time, and then I'm ready to go.
Now, if somebody goes to your website, you have information about all of these different facets of what you do. Mm-hmm. And so people would need to go to JanineSouthard.com?
Yep. You can read about me there.
There's links to all your social media as well, right?
Yeah. And honestly, if you just want to chat, I've got a contact form on there because it was too complicated to just put my email address on it. And I respond to all of the emails that I get that are not spam. So go right ahead.
Janine Southard, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us this episode. Be sure and catch every episode of DIY Author. We're available in iTunes and Stitcher, and of course we have our own dedicated app. Just go to your favorite app store and search for DIY Author. This is Chris Well saying thanks for listening. I hope you'll join me again. This has been DIY Author. Please visit us online at DIYauthor.com and be sure to sign up for our email newsletter. If you enjoyed this program, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, do it yourself doesn't have to mean do it alone.